everybody.
Hello. I always want to say, how's everybody doing? Like I'm going to get a response. Hey, everybody. If you have never listened, hopefully you have, but if you haven't, I am Terry.
Oh, and I'm Heather.
And this is the More Than Able podcast. It's just me and my wife talking about marriage, talking about what God has done in our marriage, the ministry of marriage, I guess you could say, that is the desire on our heart that God has dropped.
Yeah, the good, the bad, the ugly of marriage.
Yeah, lots of good, bad, and ugly.
Yeah.
And so,
well, this week we're just doing a bonus episode.
Yeah, we're not doing a topical discussion.
No.
So much so based on marriage, as it is just life in general for us currently, and what life has looked like for the last 9.5 years with us living in Texas.
Yeah. So if you didn't know, we are about to move to Arkansas. We moved here from Arkansas 9.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And God has called us to move back to that area. So we are moving in 3 days.
Yes.
Our house is chaos right now.
Less than 3 days, actually.
This is Wednesday. We're moving Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday morning we're pulling out. So we have 2 full days left here.
Yeah.
And it has been a ride, for sure.
It's been chaos.
Yeah. It's
not even organized chaos.
No, it's
just
not even
chaos.
It's just boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff.
We actually record in our garage. We did have a room kind of set up in here and with a couch and just a hangout space, but now it's a couch in the middle of boxes and
literally
furniture.
In the middle, there's boxes surrounding us on all sides.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've been praying since July.
Yeah.
For what God had next for us in our lives, not just me and Heather, but our family. And part of that came out of a place of where anytime we'd go back to Arkansas to visit family, it was just getting harder and harder when we left. And so we're like, okay, so are we supposed to move? Or is that just emotions? Which also the last time that we left the kids there with Heather's mom and dad for a week. And so we're like, okay, we literally just left our heart in Arkansas by leaving our kids there. And we've been away from the kids before, and, they'd been to church camp and things like that. But I don't think we'd ever left them for a week in Arkansas without us.
No.
And so coming home, me and Heather talked a lot about what that would look like, or if that would even work, or if the kids would even be on board, because our kids are 11 and 15. And so this is all Hayden knows. Like he does not remember living anywhere else because he was 2. And Eden remembers the last house we lived in, but she was 6
when
we moved down here.
Yeah.
And so this is where they have grown up. This has been their life. And so we started praying, okay, God, not move us to Arkansas, don't move us to Arkansas, but what is the next step that you have for us in our life?
Yeah. And I think when we first started praying, it was overwhelming. And I know for me, at least, I didn't really know exactly how to pray or what to pray. I feel like if you've got an idea in your head of kind of a direction where you think you might be going, it's hard not to pray specifically for that.
Yeah.
But, we didn't want to, because we didn't know if that was the right step to move. And so we didn't want to pray, hey, God, make this happen.
No, absolutely not.
So I think, it started out really just praying for him to speak to us. And as we started feeling like he was kind of nudging us in that direction, we were like, okay, well, what does that look like? And we started praying for just that next step.
Yeah, just praying the next right step and whatever that looked like. And, we looked at, did we buy a house in Texas? Because we've been in the same house renting for the last 9.5 years. But so when we moved to Texas, we were struggling financially, so much so that our paycheck would go in the bank. It'd clear up the negative. We'd go to the ATM and pull cash out just so we could buy groceries and get gas and pull it right back in the negative. And that was a nasty, nasty cycle that we were in. And, if you've listened to any of the other episodes, we were right in the midst of trying to figure out how our marriage was going to work after my affairs.
Yeah.
And we had actually been in Texas almost a year prior to the point that we had moved here for a job that I was with at the time for some training. And we were in Grapevine, Texas. And Heather had said something, I could see living here, which completely caught me off guard, because Heather's small town, grew up in a small town. And if you've ever been to Grapevine, it is not small. If you've ever been to the Metroplex, it's not small. But God had big plans for us. Mm-hmm. And when he moved us to Texas, the only thing it cost us out of pocket was the fuel for our rental truck.
Yeah.
Everything else was taken care of. And me and Heather talked a little bit about that today. And I told her, I said, I feel like it's because God knew exactly where we were financially. He knew where we were in our marriage. And he knew that we needed Texas. Mm-hmm. And his plan was for us to be here. And so he made a way where there was no way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we thought it was fitting to do this kind of bonus episode and just talk about our time here in Texas, as that season, that chapter of our lives is coming to a close. Mm-hmm. And so, we just want to sit here and maybe just reminisce a little bit, and talk a little bit about our time in Texas. And, a big part of our time here has been our church, and which when we first started going there, it was Living Church, and it's now called More Church. Mm-hmm. And actually on my memories today, I had a post on there, and it was from our very first Sunday there. And so it was exactly 8 years ago today that we walked through those doors for the first time. And our kids are at youth right now. And so exactly 8 years to the date that they walked through the doors at that church, they were walking through the doors for the last time. Yeah. And I actually shared that with our pastor's wife this morning, and I didn't know until she told me that 8 is a pretty significant number, and it means signifies like a new beginning.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was just crazy and not coincidental.
I was going to say, it's not coincidental. I think that's something me and you have talked about, is we don't believe so much in coincidences as we believe in God's plan and God's timing.
Yeah.
And for us to be 8 years to the day and filming an episode talking about our time in Texas, that's not coincidence. That's God.
Yeah.
That's just how he works. And there's been lots of things in this time where we've been talking and praying about, do we move to Arkansas, that God has been speaking to us in ways where people would say, well, that's just coincidence, but in reality, it's just God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we moved here in June of 2014.
Yep.
And as soon as we moved here, we're like, okay, we're going to find a church. Because like I said, we were in the midst of everything. And we're like, if this is going to work, it's going to have to be because we have God in the middle of it. And so we had found a church that had no type of community, no type of women's ministry or men's ministry or like discipleship.
Literally no way to connect you to other people.
Yeah.
I mean, outside of finding someone on a Sunday morning and striking up a conversation, there was just no way to connect you with other people.
But we've talked a lot about that, and it was because we feel like God placed us in that church because we needed to focus on each other. Yeah. And we felt like that it could have been a huge distraction if we would have had a whole lot of other things on our plate.
Yeah.
And God had placed us in that church for a time, and he gave us what we needed from that church. And when it was time to move, it wasn't just okay, let's go. It was we had lots of conversation. We had prayed about it, and
he made it abundantly clear.
Abundantly clear.
Yeah, how we were supposed to go.
It was like we were a horse with blinders, and God took the blinders off, and it's like, okay, it's time to go.
Yeah.
And so I think we started looking online more than anything to try to find a new church.
Yeah, and then I think we actually only tried out 3 churches.
Including Living Church.
Yeah. And, one of them, when we got there, we were like, oh, we didn't realize how far away this was.
Yeah, we're
already here, so let's go to service.
Yeah.
And then another one we tried was close by, and it was a great church. They had a good kids ministry, and I remember the preaching was good, but we just didn't feel like that was the right spot for us.
Yeah.
And then we tried out Living Church, and I think from the moment we both walked in there, we felt at home.
Yeah.
You know, if you've ever been to our church, you know it's a church of people who love on you and welcome
they want you
you.
to feel at home.
And that was, what we felt the first time we walked in there.
Yep.
And, we felt very connected to the message that was preached. I still remember that message that was preached. It was, I only remember the title because I think it was in my post today. I think it was called Everlasting Father, but it was talking about the lens that we look through and the way that we see our earthly father versus our heavenly father. And I remember that being, impactful for you when you heard that. And so I think from that first Sunday, we both knew like, okay, this is a church for us, but we didn't say it yet.
Yeah. I think on the second week, we're like, okay, yeah, this is where we're supposed to be. And like I said, we both felt like on the first week, was what it was. But we said, when we were trying churches, we said that we were going to go, I think we said a month.
Yeah. Before we made a decision.
And so by the second week, we're like, yeah, this is where we're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately started making community and friends.
Yeah. Which was not something that we even knew how to do, I don't think. We had never been in a church that put such an emphasis on community and connecting people. And, we come in there and they had life groups and men's ministries and women's ministries and kids ministries. And there was just all these different things that you can be involved in. Yeah. And they, encouraged you to get on a serve team and they still do that.
Oh, yeah.
And, I think we got into serving pretty quick after we started going there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think within like a year, you were leading the usher team. And I served in kids for a little while, and then I came over and helped you lead the usher team. And it was just, we got involved and we were going to life groups. And then before we knew it, like within a couple of years, we're like leading a life group. And
I was going to say, it was really quick because we were going to one, and then the second semester we were going to it in a different location. And by the third semester we were hosting. And I think
so maybe it was within a year of going
within
there.
a year or two.
Yeah.
And then by the second semester of that year, we were hosting and leading.
Yeah.
And so, we got involved. And I was, every time that we did a life group, I was just floored about how many people would show up.
Yeah. That season of leading life groups was, I think, really impactful for us both personally. I think for me, being like a super introvert, it helped me start to come out of my shell and push me outside of my comfort zone. And, and then through that, we were able to share our story and, share that with other people. And we weren't even in a place where we felt like we were like super healed or anything. No. I mean, that was just a few years after everything came out. And so, being able to share that with people and actually feel like we were helping them was really helpful for us. And even though there's been a whole lot of downs, probably more downs than ups since then, I still look back on that time and I'm just amazed how God still used us, even though like we were still in a really low place. Mm-hmm. And he still thought that it was, we were good enough to lead people and share our story and help people. And because that's what he does.
Well, and I think it was because we were willing. We were willing to talk about it and share about it.
Even though it was still hard.
Even though we were still in the midst of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I definitely agree. Like, that's just how God works. But I think also is because that was part of our healing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we were talking about it. We were being transparent and vulnerable about it. And that gave us an opportunity to talk with others about, and with other people that were going through the same thing.
Yeah.
There's other people that were part of our life groups that were going through a lot of the same things we were going through. And so it gave us an opportunity to help, and even in just a minute way.
Mm-hmm.
But so we did life groups, and we have always served on some level within the church. I took over, and I think I ran 2 teams, maybe 3 when we were at Matlock, and it ended up being 4 teams by the time we had moved to the school. And so we went through a lot of different seasons within the church. The church was growing. We went from 2 services to 3 services, and from 3 services to 4 services, and then we ended up going into a middle school, and we had 2 services there. And like I said, I was running 4 different teams, as far as a leader being for the volunteers. And then, the older the kids got, the more active they became.
Yeah.
And Eden's been very active in youth as long as she's been part of it. She's been part of the youth worship team. That's what she's doing tonight.
Yeah.
She's singing. And again, I think it's just the end of a season.
Yeah.
And I think it's good that she's getting to do that on her last week there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, in the last year, we've bought a building. Well, and if I backtrack a little bit, we bought property.
Yeah.
We bought 36 acres that we thought we were going to build on. And so, yeah, I think there's been just as much as up and down as roller coasters within the church as there been, maybe not as extreme, but as there has been in our marriage.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's been a lot. I feel like, just the leadership of our church, they've seen us personally go through all of our ups and downs, and, they've played a huge role in just our healing process.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure that it's impactful for them to see that play out in our lives just as it has in other people's lives that they've been a part of.
Yeah.
And anytime when you kind of help mentor somebody and you see them go from super broken to like God working in them and healing them, like that's a incredible thing to get to watch.
Yeah.
And so I've been super thankful for our pastors there and everything that, they've been for us over the years. And, I know there's been times when, our pastor's wife, Pastor Rachel, she knew that I was struggling, and she would come up to me, and it was during a time whenever I felt very, like defensive against you, like you were my enemy.
Yeah.
And I remember her just coming up to me on a Sunday and just telling me to like put my fist down, basically. Not that I was physically having my fists up trying to hit you, but, emotionally, that's what I was doing. And I remember her encouraging me and praying over me. And I know that, you had people doing the same for you. And
all the time.
Just the amount of life that we've lived here, but I feel like the life that we've lived here, it's like we've lived it in our church.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's because that's where our friends have come from. That's where our community has come from. That's where our family has come from.
Yeah.
And like you said, as much as our pastors have poured into us, it's not just been we'll pray for you. What do you guys need? Let me pray about this situation. They have cried with us. They have loved us. They have encouraged us. They have spoken over us. They have helped. Honestly, they've helped raise our kids.
Yeah.
They've prayed over them and encouraged them and talked about how our kids are, children of the house.
Yeah.
And they are. And just because we're leaving doesn't mean that we aren't still part of it, because we are. And that will always be part of what has made us what we are now.
Yeah.
And it was because of our pastor's transparency that helped us be transparent with others. Yeah, there's been so many times where, especially in the worst times, I'd be at church and they just knew, like, it wasn't okay. I wasn't okay. Like, they knew us, they know us well enough that they could see it on us. And I remember more times than I can count where they'd be like, okay, what's going on?
Yeah.
What's wrong? And it wasn't even because I went to them or I was looking for them. It was just they knew, because they know us. And them stopping in the midst of everything that they had going on and all the ins and outs of trying to be ready for service and all the extras that we have for service, and they would stop and they would pray over us. And speak encouragement and speak life into us and into our marriage. And
Yeah.
they were always there for us.
Well, and, when we first started praying about, do we, move back to Arkansas? Is that what, God's trying to point us towards? A huge part of that decision, or, a huge part of that thought process maybe was, can we really leave our church? Because it's been such a huge part of our lives.
Yeah.
And as much as, we knew it would be hard for the kids to leave friends and us to leave friends, it's, our church. Like, that means we have to leave our church too.
Yeah.
And we always looked at our church as like, this is just going to be our church forever.
Yeah.
And, we'll just always be here. And, there's been times and seasons where, like, maybe we've been frustrated at something that's happening at the church, or maybe the way they're doing things, but, you're going to experience that anywhere.
Yeah. And we've talked about that so many different times, where other people have left the church because they were upset or frustrated, or they got their feelings hurt, or they didn't agree with the way something was being done. And, there's been many times where me and you have been like, okay, let's sit down and talk about this. Like, let's pray about this. And like, okay, God, is this still where you have for us to be?
Yeah.
And it always was.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, like, there was never any doubt in my mind that, like, God was leading that church, and that, they were preaching the gospel.
Yeah.
And
the
so,
Holy Spirit was always there.
Yeah. Like, the frustrations over the years usually had to do with, more so what was going on inside of me, and just my level of irritability and nitpicking little things like, oh, I don't like the way they did this or that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's never a reason to leave a church, obviously. And I know we have had conversations about, as long as they're still preaching the word and it's, they're not deviating from that, then there's no real reason that we would leave, unless God was saying, hey, it's time to go. I have something else for you.
And that's not what this season is. It's not like, okay, God's like, okay, it's time to step out because stuff there is not. No, it's not that at all. Like, this is, we've talked a lot about the story of Peter, and Peter asking Jesus, if it's you, call me out of the boat.
Mm-hmm.
And because within the boat, you're comfortable, you're safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we feel like we have been within our church. We've been comfortable. We've been safe. God has blessed us there. We've done a lot of hard work within ourselves, within our marriage. We've done a lot of hard work within the church, whether it was volunteering or special events or helping leading this marriage ministry that we've led, or leading other teams. The church has been the lifeblood of our family.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a building. It's God.
Yeah.
That's what's been leading our life, and God has been within our church. And I know going forward that He has something even greater than we can imagine.
Yeah. Well, and I haven't even looked at this season as us leaving our church. Like, us moving is not us leaving our church. We have to leave the church because we are moving. Like, if we could just take the church with us, we would
take all the people. We would do it.
We would do that. But because we're moving, like, we can't do that. And I'll say it will always be our Texas church. Like, anytime we come back to visit, we're not going to find a different church to go to. Like, we're going to go there. Like, that will be our Texas home church.
Yeah.
And, I don't foresee that ever changing.
I don't either.
And, we didn't make a decision and choose to leave our church. We prayed and God led us to make a decision of moving, which ultimately meant we have to leave our church.
Well, and it's something that my spiritual mama, I call her mom, spoke over us is, God commands us to raise up disciples and send them off into the world.
Yeah.
And she said, that's what Texas has been for y'all, and that's what this church has been for y'all. You guys have been mentored and discipled and raised and loved and uplifted. And now God has a a calling for us in Arkansas.
Yeah.
And I even talked to one of my best friends, Billy, about it today. And I told him, I said, I don't even feel like we're moving back to Arkansas. We're moving to Arkansas because it's going to be a different town. It's going to be a different church. It's a different job, new home. And I told him, I said, I've reached out to some people that were friends when we lived up there. And I said, but I felt like God was telling me, that's not what I have for you.
Yeah.
I have something new and something greater than that for you. And that's been difficult because we have such a huge community down here of people that we call family.
Yeah, it's been 100% the hardest part about moving is leaving the people that we've grown to love here.
Yeah. And we've been part of so many different life groups. Like, I don't even know how many semesters that we led or hosted here.
No.
And
I mean, we led and hosted here. We led while someone else hosted, and then we led again at someone else's house, and then
there was
we come back here.
The Janines.
The
Jake and Janine.
Oh, yeah.
What did I say?
You said the Janines.
Oh.
So I was like,
no.
Who's that?
I got that wrong. But yeah.
And the McCulloughs.
Oh, yeah, and the McCulloughs.
And then we came back here, and which there was a season where we didn't go. I think it was during COVID season, and that they were kind of meeting on Skype or something.
Yeah.
And
I think we did for a little bit.
Yeah, we tried it.
It just wasn't the same.
Yeah. And then I think we just decided to step back and not do it. And then we were like, oh, let's try again. Well, let's lead and host again. And it just felt like a complete flop. Like, I remember trying to lead and host, and it didn't feel right. And so I was like, I think that our time in doing that is done for now.
Yeah.
And, I would love to be able to do that again in Arkansas.
I think it's coming. I do.
And, I think, we've learned so much here. Like, I feel like we are not the same people by far that we were when we moved here.
Not even
close. I mean, obviously we're 9.5 years older, but I feel like the amount of growth that we've experienced has been more than 9.5 years worth of growth.
Yeah.
And, when we first started talking about what it would look like to move, I was trying to work it out in my head and figure out, like, why would we do that? Like, we've built a life here. And immediately, like, a thought popped into my head, and then tears started streaming down my face. And because the thought that popped into my head was, we were here for our healing. And, like, I feel like that was the whole purpose of why God brought us here. And he's so kind that he gives us all of the wonderful things, like our church and our community. But we had to be here for our healing. And, it took a while. And, it wasn't just him sending us off into, like, a desert land or something to heal us and grow us while we're completely miserable. I mean, we had miserable moments here, but I feel like we've had more good moments than bad moments because of the people that we've met here.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part about moving, is now, we've got our healing, and that's a wonderful thing. And so now God's called us back to Arkansas for some reason that we don't know yet. And, but that means that everything that we establish here during this healing season, we have to say, see you later too.
Yeah.
And which feels a lot like just a goodbye.
And it's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard. Something I had Enrique tell me a couple weeks ago when I went to my last men's breakfast, when he was asking how I was doing, and I was telling him how hard it is and how sad I've been. And he said, you're grieving, bro. Like, you guys are doing what God has called you to do, but you're also losing so much within that.
Yeah.
And so we are grieving. We're not losing friends. we're not losing family, but we are leaving them.
Yeah.
And so not having those people in our lives on the daily or on the weekly or seeing them every single Sunday, we're grieving that.
Yeah.
And then even your doctor, you know, on Monday.
Yeah, I went into my doctor for a follow-up. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been just completely knocked off my feet with anxiety, which has been really frustrating because I feel like, you know, I haven't had to deal with anxiety for at least a good year.
Yeah.
And I think just all of the stress of everything is, you know, just kind of triggered it to come back up again. But, so I had went to him a couple of weeks ago for that, and I had a follow up this week. And so I was telling him, you know, this is why I think my anxiety has been so bad, because we're moving out of, the state. And so I, you know, explained all of that to him. And then of course I started crying, and I was telling him how, you know, we're leaving so many people that we love behind. And, so, you know, he talked to me about the anxiety stuff, but then he completely shifted gears and he said, I want to talk to you about something else that you're feeling that you may not be aware of. He said, you're experiencing grief. He said, because you have, you know, a lot of people that you are leaving behind. He said, and you're grieving that. And he said, not that knowing that information makes it any better, any easier. He said, but knowing that can help you process through it and know what it is when it hits you. He said, because grief comes in waves. And he said, you could be doing fine 1 minute and then the next just get hit with a wave of it.
Yeah.
And he said, or you could go 9 months down the road and feel like you're fine, and then something happens, you get to missing somebody or a place or something. He said, and it hits you again and you feel like you're right back in it. He said, grief is just a weird thing like that. And so, you know, him telling me that, and, you know, Enrique telling you that, it was like kind of a, I don't know, professional confirmation from the doctor that, like, yeah, that's a real thing. Like, somebody doesn't have to die for you to grieve losing them.
And I think it's so easy for people to think, well, grief is tied to death, but it's not. What I've realized is that's not the only thing it's tied to. It's tied to a loss.
Yeah.
And no, our friends aren't leaving us, and they're still there, and we can still talk to them, and we'll still visit. And there's been so many that have already said they're going to come up and see us, and but it's just different. It's still hard, and that's what it's been for me even today. It's just you talk about the roller coaster and the up and the down, and it's when my mind isn't focused on a task at hand, and when I'm not working on getting the house packed and trying to get things done. When I sit down, and it's like my brain, I'm allowing myself to think about how much I'm going to miss everybody.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's been some things that have been said that have kind of like, why would you say that? Like, don't say stuff like that. Like, that makes it harder. But then there's also been those people that are like, you're not losing us. You're not leaving us. Like, you're doing what God has called you to do. There's been confirmation after confirmation after confirmation. So you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, what God has called you to. And we're still going to see each other.
Yeah.
It just won't be as often.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still really hard.
Yeah.
I know our families in Arkansas are super excited for us to come back. And if I had to guess, especially my mom, she probably understands, probably more so than I think, how we're probably feeling right now, because when I was a kid, I was 10 or 11, we moved from Indiana to Arkansas, and that's where all of our family was.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things. I never would have imagined that we would have been moving to Arkansas after almost 10 years of being here. But I think also when we moved to Texas, it was different. It wasn't sad, at least for me, to leave Arkansas.
No, I think, you know, I never cried packing up the house. I never felt sad like that we were leaving so many people or anything like that. I think I cried a little bit when we were actually driving out of town, and it was more so because, like, I grew up there. Like, that's pretty much all I've ever known. And so leaving that behind felt sad, but it only lasted for a moment and then it was gone.
Yeah.
And I think, we were in such a dire place in our marriage. It felt like we just needed out of there. We needed a fresh start somewhere. And, it worked out to where Texas was the right place for us.
Well, and I remember the week that we were getting ready to leave, I had posted something on Facebook about, hey, would take any help by anybody that's available.
Mm-hmm.
And the only people that showed up was your mom and dad.
Yeah.
And now it's like the amount of people that have told us they're going to be here Friday to help us load the truck up. I'm like, we're going to have the truck loaded. It's so quick. We're going to be like, okay, now what do we do?
Yeah.
and that's just the difference in what God has blessed us with here compared to what we had in Arkansas.
Well, and when we lived in Arkansas before, I don't think there was ever anywhere that we ever went that had that emphasis on community like our church here does. So we never learned how to do that, like how to do life with people and how to just have friends, like healthy friends, not friends that like you go out and party and get drunk with. Yeah. Those were the kind of friends that we had for a little while.
And I think that's something that we're going to be taking with us, that knowledge of how to build that community, because we may not find a church that has that emphasis, but that doesn't mean that we can't bring that element within that church that God is directing us to and build that community, but also help that church build that community.
Yeah.
And not just the relationships and the friends and the family, but also the transparency, because that was something we had never experienced inside of a church, outside of Living Church, and now More Church. But having a pastor stand up on stage and literally, I remember one sermon he did, he stripped down to a pair of shorts and a t-shirt.
Yeah.
And just talking about being transparent and exposing everything.
Yeah.
But he is the type of pastor that will tell you that he struggled with pornography and he struggled with lying and he struggled with bitterness and anger and not just tell you that he has, but give you stories and examples of how and what that looked like within his life.
Yeah. And our church that we went to for a little while down here before that had a pastor that was more like a kind of a put himself on a pedestal type person. Like, I remember looking at him and thinking like he's better than everybody else. Like,
that's the way he portrayed himself.
Like, God's anointed him to be a pastor, but that somehow anoints him as holier than everybody.
Yeah.
And I at the time didn't really know that was wrong or that there was anything bad with that, because that's kind of how I viewed pastors. Like, they've been set apart from the rest of us,
but they haven't.
They're just people.
Yeah.
And we're all just people, and if God places a calling on your life to become a pastor, that doesn't mean that he has dubbed you holier than everybody else.
No.
It just means he's placed a calling in your heart to, share the gospel in a bigger way than most people. And, we all have callings on our lives, and one isn't necessarily more important than the other. I mean, we're all called to share the gospel.
Yeah.
And so we're all going to do that on different levels. And it doesn't mean that, you're better than anyone else. We're all people. We all make mistakes and get it wrong.
Yeah. And I think also going into this next season, it's not going to be just about what God is going to use us for, but I think it's also going to be what he's going to use our kids for.
Yeah.
And how they are going to have an impact within their school, within the church, within the community. And I think it's going to be a huge season for them for growth and strength and relying on God and knowing that even though this is hard, leaving what we've all known for so long, we're not going to be just okay. We're going to be great.
Yeah.
Because we're doing what God has called us to do.
Yeah.
And I know that's the truth, and we've seen the attack come.
Mm-hmm.
Because Satan doesn't want it to happen.
Yeah.
It'd be much easier for us to just say, no, we're not going to do this. We're comfortable here. This is where we've been.
Yeah.
We love our
that
church.
That would have been real easy
and
to do.
It would have been, and I think eventually over time we would have been miserable because we weren't following in his plan and in his will for our lives.
Yeah.
And I don't want that. And even though this is hard, I think it would be even worse had we decided to stay and not go in the direction that we have been praying. God, what are we doing? Give us the next step. Give us the next step. Yeah. What's the next step? Now what do we do? Now where are we going? What are we supposed to do? What does this look like? And I think his plan for us in marriages is just going to continue to grow and develop. And I think he's going to continue to use us within that. And I'm excited. I'm excited about a lot of things. I'm excited about our new home. I'm excited about living in a small town again. I'm excited about something I talked to Lova about that God dropped on my heart this week was a sermon that Trustin had done quite a while back. And he was talking about how God can only use us when we are willing, able, and strong enough to do so. And he will only move us when we are set in his foundation. And he was talking about how if you build a tent, you have to have your stakes firmly in the ground. And when you have your stakes firmly in the ground, your tent will stand. And God will only expand your tent when you're strong enough to do so. And Trustin talked about that and how God wants to expand our tent and to reach more people. And I told Love, I said, I feel like that's what God is doing with us. He's expanding our tent. You know, we're not losing the church that we have. We're not losing the friends and the family that we have here. He's just expanding us into a new territory. And because our foundation is so strong within him that he has built within our church and our community here, we're ready for that. We're ready for the expansion. Yeah. Does that mean it's easy? No. It's actually really hard. It stretches us. It pulls us. But I know we're doing what is right. Yeah.
There's something I pulled up on my phone. I actually had shared it today, but it was a part of one of my devotions I'm doing. And I thought I would read it here and maybe it would encourage somebody else too. But it says, there's no need to stress about what God's already got worked out. God knows exactly what you are going through, keyword through, exactly when he will get you through, exactly how he will guide you through, and exactly where you will grow while you go through. And when I read that, I was like, man, I could have really used that a few months ago. But because like I've stressed so much about this because I don't know how, or I didn't know how it was going to work. Like, how are we going to get a house, and how are we going to move? How are we going to tell our friends? How are we going to tell our church that we're moving? And, you know, God's provided every step of the way. Like he already sees the entire picture. You know, we now know some of the things and how it's working out, but there's still so much more that we don't know. But, you know, now we are a little more confident in trusting where he's taking us, you know, and I think that's, you know, where just seeing him work and, you know, trusting him with each next step and seeing him, you know, just his faithfulness, like it builds your faith up a little bit more and more each time. It doesn't mean that it's easy.
No.
Like none of this has been easy. But it just builds your faith. Yeah. And I feel like we've kind of been on a journey the last 6 months of like God just building our faith little by little.
Well, and I had a good friend of mine send me a message yesterday, and I won't read the whole thing, but one of the biggest things that I think both of us have struggled with through this time is not trusting and having the faith that God's going to work it out, but it's in the moments where it's so hard and we're like asking all the questions why and what does this look like, and worried about jobs and worried about homes and worried about a school and worried about a church, when in reality the whole time God is holding us. And I'll read this to you. It said, just remember that God has got you in the palm of his hands and you are exactly where you need to be. And when I read that, it was like a huge slap in the face, because I literally have that tattooed on my arm.
Yeah.
Isaiah 49:16 says, see, I have inscribed your name in the palms of my hands. And so God has got us. Mm-hmm. He knows what he's doing. Just because we don't know what he's doing and we don't know what it looks like, we're supposed to trust his power, that God has the power to make it happen, mm-hmm. but also to trust his plan.
Yeah.
And that God has got a plan. Even though we don't know what it is, we still don't know what it's going to look like when we get there.
No.
But as long as we keep saying, okay, God, we trust you, we believe in you, mm-hmm. we know this is your plan for us, help us to continue to make the next right step.
Yeah.
He's going to work it out.
Yeah. Well, and I would just say, if I had any encouragement for, somebody that's listening that may be in that season where they're praying and asking God what's next, is to, take the focus off of the big picture of, wanting him to reveal this huge plan to you.
He's not going to do that.
Something that I prayed in the very beginning was, God, I need a billboard. I need you to give me a big, huge sign of yes, this is what we're supposed to do. And he spoke very clearly to me and said, no, I'll give you a whisper. And when I dug into that a little bit more, I learned that, or maybe I just remembered, whenever you whisper to somebody, you can't whisper and them hear you without getting close.
Yeah.
And so it was like him telling me, you have to get closer to me so that you can hear me clearly. Yeah. And then even then, it was just a next step. It was not hey, here's the whole plan.
Here's your house. This is, yeah.
But if God gave us the whole plan for our lives up front, not a single one of us would walk that plan out. If before I ever met you, if he would have told me, you're going to meet a man and this is his name and these are all the things you're going to walk through, I would have tucked tail and ran the other way. I don't want to be any part of that. That's not my fairy tale.
Right.
That doesn't sound appealing. He doesn't give you the whole picture for a reason, because our minds can't comprehend all of the things that his can. And all the magnitude of his plans for us.
And the way he does it.
Yeah.
And when he starts opening doors and shutting doors, then we can look and be like, okay, that door was shut because that was not what we were supposed to do. That was not where we were supposed to be. And doors that were open in such a way, it's like a floodlight slaps you in the face.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's God. Mm-hmm. God did that. That was the whole thing with me trying to find a job. I was looking and applying everywhere. I can't tell you how many applications I put out there. And I had some interviews and I had some phone calls and I had multiple phone calls with a couple of different companies. But it never worked out. And the reason it didn't work out is because that wasn't what God wanted. Mm-hmm. And when I finally quit trying to steer the freaking boat, he did it.
Yeah.
When I quit putting applications in, when I quit looking for a job, then God gave me a job.
Kind of let go of that control.
Yep.
Or sense of control.
Yeah. Sensing, thinking, oh, I got this.
Yeah.
So.
But, well, we were going to try to keep this as a short episode, but there's just too much. We've been here so long and,
and there's so many things we still didn't even talk about.
Oh, yeah. We could probably sit here and literally talk for hours about our Texas season.
Yeah.
But our next episode will be in Arkansas. And I can't quite wrap my head around it yet.
No.
We have 3 more sleeps in our house. And then we'll be in our new home in Arkansas. And I can't wrap my head around it yet. It's, we've had a lot of memories in this house. And I think that maybe just as hard to pull out of here on Saturday and leave our home of 9.5 years behind, where our kids have, grown and, learned so much stuff. They've went from being, little kids to now, like, Eden's nearly grown.
Yeah.
And Hayden, I mean, he's almost a teenager.
Yep.
And, there's been a lot of life lived in this house and a lot of memories. And I think that's going to be just as hard. And so I can't quite wrap my head around going to sleep in a different house yet. Like, I think that's going to be bizarre.
Very, very, it will be very surreal for a while,
Yeah.
I think. Well, hey, I made it through this whole episode, and I didn't cry.
Yeah.
I was
had
on
a big
edge.
lump in my throat
Yep,
once.
I was on edge,
but
and I think my eyes were probably getting watery, but
Yeah.
I made it. So,
go us.
hey, I hope y'all are getting some encouragement out of our story and what God has done, and I really hope you're enjoying it. We do have some more topical subjects that we want to hit on, and that might be next week. It just depends on how it works out. Because yes, we are moving and we have a lot to do that it's ahead of us, but we definitely want to make sure that we're
Being consistent.
Yeah, being consistent, and definitely being consistent. So we appreciate y'all listening, and as always, if you ever want to reach out, send us a DM, or just comment on one of our posts.
Yeah.
So
share it out too. If there's somebody that that you think would enjoy listening to us, share it with anybody, everybody.
All right, y'all. We'll check y'all later.
Yeah. See you next week in Arkansas.